Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock. Happy day before Friday to you. Out there in America, Uncle Jimmy, still struggling with COVID, but we feel like we're making some progress with Uncle Jimmy. I think we've got him in touch with the right people, and so keep Uncle Jimmy in your prayers. He'll be back with us shortly. But, you know me, the show must go on even without Uncle Jimmy. And so I reached out to one of the best comedians here in Nashville. We call him Big Kinfolk, Jay Blake. Jay performs at Zany's here in Nashville. We're going to call him Cousin Kinfolk over the next couple of days. Yeah. Jay, welcome to Fearless. Glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here, man. I'm glad to be here.
What do you think of my set? You've made no comment on my album covers. You know, the Isley Brothers, that's the greatest group of all time in the upper right-hand corner there. But what do you think of our set?
It's a nice set. I can't complain about this set. It's a nice set. I mean, we go from George Strait to Public Enemy, but it's a nice set. It threw me off a little bit.
We're in Nashville, man. You gotta, I'm trying to be diverse and inclusive.
Okay, all right.
We're here in Nashville. But anyway, Jay's gonna be with us. Big Kinfolk is gonna be with us all day today. Help us lighten things up. As always, we have a fantastic show planned for you. I've come up with a fire starter that made me have to reach out to my guy, LeVar Arrington. You guys know LeVar, one of the greatest college football players of all time. Second overall pick in the NFL draft years ago. Great linebacker for the Washington Redskins. One of my best friends. We'll roll out to Los Angeles and bring LeVar into our initial discussion. Later in the show, we'll roll out to Washington, D.C. and bring in Professor D, Delano Squires. There's a story out of Atlanta that's fascinating we'll talk with Delano about. An Atlanta school started with segregated classes for black and white students. They're being sued. We'll discuss that with Delano. We'll also roll out to Chicago and bring in our good friend of the show, Greg Couch. He's written a column about the NCAA and Mark Emmert basically being worthless, both the NCAA and Mark Emmert. But you know what we do here. We start every show with a fire. And I think I got a good one, maybe a little lighthearted fire, a little different kind of fire than I normally start. For those of you who have followed my work for any length of time, you know I consider the HBO show The Wire television's Bible. The crime drama depicting the relationship amongst Baltimore police, politicians, drug users, and drug dealers. Yeah, it explains America. Jay, I hope have you seen The Wire?
I've definitely seen The Wire.
It explains America. It's my Bible. I can pretty much analogize anything to The Wire. Today, I'll use the show to explain Instagram fitness model Brittany Renner, NBA small forward PJ Washington, NFL quarterback Deshaun Watson, and the dangers of social media addiction. Renner, 29, and Washington, 22, are back in the celebrity gossip news cycle. A few months ago, the pair had a baby. A few weeks ago, Renner and Washington split as a couple. Yesterday, internet gossip spread that Washington would be forced to pay Renner $200,000 a month in child support. That's some serious child support.
Serious child support. Huggies is overpriced.
Yeah. All right. Social media memes ran wild with the news, joking that Renner had scored a Supermax thought contract from a naive professional athlete. An old video of Renner saying the easiest way for a woman to score a huge payday was to get knocked up by a dumb jock. Take a listen for yourself.
In my experience, the worst people to deal with are the athletes. None of them use condoms, really. So if y'all really want to try to come up off a check off a man, I mean, you could just an athlete. They're really done.
She kept it real there. That's when keeping it wrong goes, or when keeping it real goes wrong, that may have been it. But the Renner Washington news and the countless memes provoked me to join the tweet onslaught. I tweeted, quote, PJ Washington caught in the real trap house. But for the grace of God, there go I. 4 years ago, I used to spend 30 minutes a day looking at Brittany's IG. All right, the tweet and admission formed the best kind of joke, humor laced with a kernel of truth and soaked in self-deprecation. Some of you guys on Twitter took it way too seriously, but I'm going to ignore you Twitter idiots and go to my wire analogy. There are two problematic users in modern society, drug users and social media users. Both users chase the same dopamine high. In The Wire, the highest form of heroin was nicknamed WMD, a weapon of mass destruction. The same is true on social media corners. Women messaging directly, that's the best high. When you see those three dots bubbling, you have the same excited anticipation the fictional junkie Bubbles had when he placed a needle deep inside a vein in his arm. You just lay back and wait for the high. If she never hits send or the message is negative, you complain about the quality of the product and go buy dope on a different corner. Brittany Renner, you know who she is, Jay?
Yes.
Proposition Joe, Prop Joe. She's a weapon of mass destruction. Her dope is straight off the boat from the Greeks. It's uncut. Brittany buys for $1 and sells for $2. The former Jackson State University soccer MVP started posting on Instagram 8 or 9 years ago under the name Bundle of Brittany. I can't remember when I discovered her, but it was probably around the time she was dating Colin Kaepernick back in 2014, before Cap turned woke. Back then, Cap was my favorite player, and good Lord, I loved looking at pictures of Brittany. I exaggerated when I said I spent 30 minutes every day perusing her IG page, but once a month I did. I had an Instagram addiction. It was my porn hub. At one point, I followed probably 75 IG models. Bundle of Brittany was my favorite bundle. I bring all this up because I actually have sympathy for PJ Washington and, to a lesser degree, Deshaun Watson. If I were in my early 20s, super wealthy, single, famous, and as attractive as I am now, I would likely be mainlining WMD. It took 50 years of life experience for me to wean myself off Baby Got Back IG. No way would I have conquered my addiction at 25. Instagram is heroin. It's an incredible delusion that cheapens all forms of human interaction. The sexual component makes IG more addictive and harmful than even Twitter. Watson ruined his reputation and perhaps his career searching for rub and tug massage therapists on Instagram. A young kid with monopoly money could satiate his lust simply by reaching for his cell phone and direct messaging the fitness model massage therapist of his choice. It's just too easy. It's just too tempting. Anything worth having should require some difficulty and discipline. Technology is removing difficulty and discipline from our lives. It's not improving our lives. Humans were meant to hunt and gather. We now Uber and DoorDash. I'm a symptom of an American reality. We're the most overweight place on earth. Relative strangers create children after swiping right on Tinder or connecting over DMs. Renner likely fished Washington out of her Instagram river. When Washington was a sophomore at the University of Kentucky, the then 27-year-old Renner started showing up at his basketball games decked out in Kentucky gear. She'd already been in relationships with or linked to former Jackson State quarterback Casey Thoreau, NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, NBA players James Harden, Jamal Murray, and Ben Simmons, entertainers Lil Uzi Vert, Drake, Trey Songz, Tyga, and Chris Brown. Why not me? Why am I not on that list? I spent all that damn time on her Instagram feed. How come I'm not on the list? Brittany, holler at your... I'm joking. She was considered a thought, a new slang word for groupie. The letters stand for that hoe over there. She posed naked on the cover of her 2019 book titled Judge This Cover. She wrote explicitly about her illicit sexual lifestyle with high-profile men. It's fair to blame Washington for allowing himself to get trapped by someone so open with their immorality. But Washington is just a kid. How would we view this situation if a 27-year-old male porn star targeted a female sophomore in college? I want to apologize for making excuses for Washington. I deeply apologize if this comes off like I'm excusing Watson's behavior. It's easy to point out Washington and Watson's failures. I'm writing this so we can assess some of the other factors in play. The phony social media world baits all of us into phony casual relationships. But for the grace of God and these 2 or 3 extra pounds I'm carrying, there go I. That's my fire, Jay.
First of all, 2 or 3 extra pounds.
Maybe 3 or 4.
Okay, all right. Maybe round up to like 7, 8, maybe 10.
Yeah.
That's why she ain't hit you back in the DM. You don't have a wicked jump shot.
I gotta be honest.
You can't pass the ball 60 yards. You know?
I never hit her DM. Cameron Hall's DMs, I used to be all up here.
Hey, I can't get mad at you for that one.
I used to be all. Let's roll out to LA real quick, because I want to bring it Los Angeles and bring in LA, LeVar Arrington. I call him for the most times when we're not on TV, I call him Trish's husband. LeVar's better half is actually the star of the family, but I still engage and talk with LeVar just so I can engage and interact with Trish. LeVar, welcome back to the show. What do you think of my fire starter? What do you think of this Whitlock, as you would know?
You know, I love your Whitlocks, first and foremost. You know I love them. I think your mind is super creative, and very few people that I know of can actually take what they're thinking and be able to write it out and verbalize it the way that you do. So I always like to start there. On this one, though, you're absolutely wrong. You're tremendously wrong. You're 1,000% wrong on this one, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because it's the identity that we have to take a look at. It's the formation of who you are and what you represent that we have to look at. We're looking at the young lady and we're calling her the thought. But see, here's the problem. The issue you run into is you're assuming that that's the thought. It's the other side. That's the thought. It's the athlete. It's the entertainer. It's the person that goes for what is perceived to be the thought. See, we get caught up into making these people the athlete, the entertainer, the judge, the whatever it may be, right? The professional. It's always portrayed as they are the victim of thoughty acts. She signed the largest thoughty contract that's out there available, max contract. No, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. See, it's the thought mentality that the athlete or the entertainer, or whatever, in this case, the athlete brings to the table, that is being satisfied. It's something that, to me, I always ask myself, you know, I was a high draft pick. I was a popular dude coming out of college and even dated high profile people. My business never was mainstream business, ever. And it's because I had what I would like to believe relationships of substance. Like, and we all have our dark moments of interaction with people, ones that we regret. Yes.
LeVarrington.
Yes.
This man just sat on this show, Jay, and said none of his business ever went mainstream.
It wasn't mainstream.
None of his business ever went Serena Williams.
Yeah, I believe that's mainstream.
You can't give me details on it. Give me details. Show me the receipt. Show me the receipt.
I mean, but when he played, Twitter wasn't the hottest thing out when you came out. When you got drafted at that time either. Social media wasn't like it was.
There was MySpace. There was Black Planet. You know, Facebook had just started to come around. But the point is even back then, celebrity relationships were highly publicized. I've never been in a tabloid. My personal life never became a mainstream story. There might have been one headline here or there that may have speculated what my situations were. But that's because there's identity involved, identity in who I was dealing with and my own identity. So regardless of what the situation was, we handled it like adults. Even as youngsters, we handled it as adults. Did I have opportunities to deal with the type of people that Brittany Renner is? Of course. I mean, we all do. Even you do, Jason. Don't act like you don't have exposure. People know who Whitlock is, and there's some fine-looking, attractive people out there that want to deal with listening to your Whitlocks at night while you're crafting them. I mean, that's just how it rolls sometimes. But it ultimately comes down to how you feel about yourself. You're going to deal with reflections of who you are. So to me, when I look at a story like this, I used to get upset at baby mama drama stories and child support stories and all those different things. But ultimately, you are the reflection of what you deal with. So I always say when people say, oh, I didn't know, like she got you, she did this to you, but I didn't know. I was a young kid. I was immature. You knew. You knew, believe me, even immature, you knew. So in the end, you chose what you wanted.
Let me ask you this, LeVar.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Now, in this situation, I understand where you're coming from, but in this situation, she actually showed up 27 years old to a college sophomore basketball game. So she was, as the old school people say, courting him as a sophomore in college and coming up and approaching him decked out in his Kentucky gear. And I guess as a young man, when you say, hey, she's been around all these other superstars, maybe I'm on that superstar status now, and I got to get in where I fit in.
And I would say to you, you're suggesting that that's the only bad shorty that rolled up on him? Come on now. It's probably been way more long before she came along. So now it's all about, are you keeping the fish on your hooks? Are you putting fish back and going for bigger fish? It seemed as though, just based off of the resume that Jason Whitlock ran off on his Whitlock, that her resume was long enough and impressive enough for another company wanting to acquire her services. That's what it sounded like to me.
Let me say this, LeVar, because if I heard you right, you said you disagreed with me. I don't know why you said that, because but for the grace of God, in my view, there goes LeVar, because again, trust me, Trish is a blessing from God. You had nothing to do with that. God sent you somebody to save you from yourself. And so if I heard you correctly, basically you said, your argument is LeVar Arrington at Penn State, and when he entered the NFL, he was a thought.
Not ready for her. I wasn't ready for her. I was too much of a thought. And I had to find who I was. And by the time I found out who I was, by the grace of God, able to execute the way that I needed to execute when I met a real one. That's how it worked out. So that's the point. Some of us actually take deep dives into figuring out who we are. Like you can only deal with so many people trying to figure out who you are before you got to stop and take a look at who you are for yourself. You got to stop having people define that for you. I happen to have a wife that's actually a physical embodiment of what she feels on the inside, what she looks like on the inside. She's actually a mirror reflection. I'm not as pretty as she is. So for me, she's a reflection of who I am on the inside. But I can only come to that conclusion of what my mirror representation is. And once I look in the mirror and I can be happy with the person that I'm seeing in myself. If I got to look in the mirror and I'm lying to myself and I'm dealing with other people, relying on them to define who I am and what my worth is, you're running the risk of what we're talking about right now, is dealing with the wrong people. And they'll call you names. They'll call you dumb. They don't use rubbers, this, that, and the other. And you'll still deal with them. And it's only because you're chasing that high. That I agree with some of the stuff you're saying. You're chasing the high of having someone that otherwise, if you couldn't hoop or play football or rap or whatever it may be, or write Whitlocks, you probably don't get the opportunity to hang with that chick. So in the end, you're taking the physical challenge of it, even though you know that you're risking your welfare, you're risking your well-being, so to speak. But I look at it like this: you're not risking it. You're making a decision, but you're making an educated decision. I want to talk to her. I want to deal with her. I saw her come to my game. She got Kentucky gear on, I want her. I know exactly why she's here. Let me get my game right. I might usually lay the ball up, do a finger roll here and there. You know what? I'm dunking tonight because I see her. She sees me. I know she's looking at me. She knows I'm looking at her, so let me give her what she wants. And she's thinking the same exact thing when she's looking at you. I'm going to give him what he wants. Everybody's getting what they want, and then it turns into a situation when there's a baby involved. A baby gets involved or somebody gets popped upside the head. It becomes a physical relationship. They're abusive to one another. Now there's a problem. But all the way up until that, y'all playing on the same court. Y'all playing on the same football field, same tennis court, same baseball diamond, whatever it is, same track, whatever it is, y'all playing on that same surface until y'all not. That's the idea of it. You don't automatically become a victim the minute something goes wrong. Wasn't nobody calling the dude a victim while he was dating her. He only became a victim when they started reporting how much he was paying in child support. And now he's a victim. No, he wasn't a victim. That's what they had going on. And now all of a sudden, now you got to pay for your kid. And it's based off of how much you make. That's just how it works. You knew that going in. I'd like to say I have a little bit of sympathy and remorse, but we've all been there. We have all been there. Young man has to take a look at himself, and he has to understand you got to first stop being a thought before you can stop dealing with a thought. That's what it comes down to.
LaVarrington, that's your best work, man. And that's why I keep telling people,
trying to be like you.
You gotta go. You gotta go watch, follow, listen to his Up on Game radio show on Fox Sports on the weekend, just a podcast. He and TJ Houshmandzadeh and Plaxico Bears dropped the kind of science he just dropped today. That's your best work. I'm not used to you coming on here and sounding almost as smart as me. We may not have you back. I don't like being upstage.
I got to work on it.
I don't like being upstage. We're gonna let you go. Yeah, we gotta let you go. Jay, you got it.
I like one of the points he made. One of the points he made is some of these guys are simps. Just straight out, they simps. They like to be Eskimo brothers and say, oh, I messed with the same girl that Drake messed with. Oh, I messed with the same girl Colin Kaepernick messed with. Sometimes that's what happens. And some of these guys, I don't understand why. But when you get into that sports world, a lot of people, and Hollywood, you hear they roll around with the same woman getting tossed around back and forth. Now, which one you gonna reel in and toss back out? And PJ got caught up trying to have a keeper. And when you have a male and female goldfish, you end up with a lot of other goldfish in your tank the next day.
It's an interesting point you make. And again, to some degree, it's a part of athlete culture or the culture in terms of, and I go all the way back to, wasn't it Snoop? It ain't no fun unless my homie can have some.
Homies ain't no fun.
And I'm Jay, honest to goodness, I used to listen to that when I was younger, and I would be like, hold on, how does him being involved increase my fun? I've never had that situation where it's like, oh man, I'm having fun and this is the greatest, blah, blah. Man, I wish my boy could get some of this.
It never was for me, but some people think like that.
Yeah, and that's because you do have to wonder. She wrote a book, I think in 2018.
Yeah.
Explaining all of, I've been with this guy, I've been with that, I've been with this. PJ had access.
That was a sign that she should not be trusted, right there.
And I got to give her credit. I think since this controversy broke out, since they split up and he started whining over social media, I think she tweeted out like, hey, you knew who I was from the jump.
Right.
Why you tripping?
It's like when you talked about The Wire earlier. It's like if you know it's a known snitch in the streets, you know not to sell heroin to him anymore. Don't sell him nothing else. He just left the jail. He had Red Lobster. He had a Whopper with cheese. He had everything. But you still gonna go out here and sell dope to him. Yeah, okay. What you expect to happen?
Before the show, you were making an interesting point. You asked me a question about The Wire, and you asked me, friends of yours, and it bothers me, but friends of mine that try to analogize it to Power.
Yeah, Power is better than The Wire. I said, you just got the hottest piece of meat off the skillet. That's all. It don't mean it's good meat. You just got the hottest piece of meat off the skillet. You know, it's basically what happened. I mean, The Wire is straight out one of the best TV shows ever. Power, I don't think it sniffs draws.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with either show, as I described earlier, The Wire is a show about drug dealers and politicians and police and drug users in Baltimore. And anybody that's followed my work knows I think it's the greatest thing that's ever been on TV. The only thing that, to me, comes close or compares is Roots. But The Wire explains modern America. Power is like a bad knockoff Gucci purse of The Wire. I think I got 6 or 7 episodes in. Everybody's talking about Power, and it's some 50 Cent show. Not to diss 50 Cent, is glad that he's making all that money, but it just ain't the same as The Wire. So now I got that off my chest. Let me tell you about my good friends at Good Ranchers. You want great tasting steaks, Jay? Go to Good Ranchers. You want great tasting chicken and pork? Go to Good Ranchers. You want great tasting, 100% farm-raised American food? Go to Good Ranchers. I do, and the experience of doing so has been incredible. And the experience at home can be incredible for you as well. Your local grocery store can't compete with the flavor and taste you'll get from them. This is truly some of the best steak, chicken, and pork seafood I've had. If you subscribe, you will get $20 off and free express shipping. Get steakhouse quality for less than $5 per meal. Go to goodranchers.com/fearless to get $20 off and free express shipping. I'm telling you, this is the smartest thing you can do if you like to eat. That's goodranchers.com/fearless. Welcome back. Jason Whitlock, Fearless with Jason Whitlock. Big kinfolk, Jay Flake, local Nashville comedian, friend of the show, sitting in for Uncle Jimmy, who's still recovering from COVID. We're about to roll out to Washington, D.C. and bring in the smartest man on the show. You guys know him as Delano Squires. We call him Professor D, Professor Delano. We're going to get into a conversation about integration, segregation that's going on in Atlanta. The Blaze wrote a story about a story out of Atlanta about a school that's segregating students, black classes, white classes. But before we do that, Delano, and we're going to bring Delano in from Washington, D.C., I want to get your reaction to my column and monologue about P.J. Washington, Brittany Renner, Deshaun Watson, and just social media and social media addictions. I admit, when I first got on IG, I spent way too much time looking at Brittany Renner and other Instagram models. But Delano, what's your take?
So I think if I could go back to something I said a couple days ago, it's a similar situation that we talked about in terms of having self-control. And when people don't, and particularly when they're young men with a lot of money, a lot of disposable income, and who get a lot of attention from women, without that self-control, you can end up in some very, very bad situations, ranging from issues that could result in lawsuits or criminal charges in the Deshaun Watson case, to just, a lifetime of, I don't want to say poverty, because P.J. Washington is, he's going to be well off. He plays in the NBA, but a good portion of his income is going to go to the young lady with whom he has children. And I'm not sure that that's how he planned it, but that's what he's looking at right now. And it, honestly, Jason, it reminded me of, in the book of Proverbs, I think it's in chapter 5, where you hear a father addressing his son and telling him to avoid immoral women. And he says, their lips are sweeter than honey. So, their speech is very nice and very pleasing to the ear. But he said that the way that they travel is a path that leads to death. And later in that chapter, it says that other people will enjoy your wealth and consume the fruits of your labor. And I think P.J. Washington is about to find that out pretty soon.
I've certainly found that out.
That's a word.
I want to ask you this. I want to ask you this, Jay, and then I want Delano, you to follow up, because Delano just mentioned the words self-control, and that people need to exercise self-control. Part of what I was saying in my column is that for me at 54, I can say, yeah, they should exercise more self-control, but I wasn't born into this technology era where to me it's just there's more temptation out there. It's so much easier, and that it's harder to exercise self-control when it's the temptations in your cell phone, in your smartphone, in your pocket, in your hand, everywhere you go. I just think technology makes it harder on these young, wealthy, plenty of free time celebrities and athletes. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, because remember, growing up at a certain time, they tell you to go to your room and you didn't have access to anything.
There you go.
But now you can send a kid to their room, and you also got to take the phone, you got to take the computer, you got to take the TV down, you got to take all this stuff down out of the room and make it completely bare for them not to have access. Because you can take the phone, guess what? You got internet on your TV. You can take the TV, guess what? You got your laptop. It's just so much temptation out there. It's insane.
You make a hell of a point, because I say this all the time, Delano. I'm going to come back to you. When I was growing up, Delano, we had one TV in the house, we had one record player, and we had, I think, 2 phones, one in the kitchen and one in my mama's room. That was it. And we didn't have call waiting. We certainly didn't have 3-way calling. And so unless your mama was off the phone from talking to her sister, your auntie, you couldn't get a phone call. You didn't have access to nobody. And so that's where, Delano, you're a parent, Jay, I think you're a parent.
Yeah.
That's why I just think the job of parents is so much harder than when I was growing up.
And I would definitely agree with that, because, I mean, when I was a teenager, if I was sent to my room, I was gonna have to listen to the radio, whether it was the local R&B station or listening to Game 7 of the World Series. That's about all the entertainment that I had in my room. But I agree with you 100%. And in some respects, I understand the pressures that these athletes are facing. There are 2 things that I really thank God for. And I like your line, Jason, at the end of your column, when you said, "There, but for the grace of God go I." And I'm serious when I say this. Because if I was, in my mid-20s, early to mid-20s, with a lot of money, even if I didn't have much money, honestly, the things that I thank God for, one, was keeping me away from certain college campuses, because I probably wouldn't have been as focused on school if I went to, Howard University as opposed to, University of Pittsburgh for undergrad. And 2, for keeping me out of the sort of Tinder generation, because, when I was coming up, the technology just wasn't there. I actually remember going out on a date and having to print out my directions on MapQuest and having to hold it while I was driving, to my location. So the technology does change all of these interactions. It brings everything that you want right to your fingertips. And I like what you said in terms of we went from a people who, hunted and gathered to Uber and DoorDash. And I think the way technology has evolved has made it a lot easier for athletes to be susceptible, and particularly in the PJ Washington case, because as you said, if we were talking about a 27-year-old man who was showing up to the games or modeling sessions or wherever a 18-year-old girl was either working or going to school, this conversation would be very, very different. And it does seem like in many ways she targeted him, and she knew he was an easy mark. And she said it in one of her videos. She said, these athletes are not particularly smart. They like to have unprotected sex. And if you're a woman who's looking to, quote unquote, secure the bag, these guys are the best guys to do it with. And I think, and that's why I said these people like that, people who take advantage of others, whether they're men or women, are going to be there. It's up to us as individuals to have the discernment and the self-control to say, okay, I see that one coming from a mile away. I'm not going to indulge that. And I think, and this is the last point I'll make on this, you heard somebody like LeVar Ball saying something to this effect when he was, talking on a different network about the advice he gives his sons as it relates to dating as NBA players. And, to sum it up, he's like, look, you're not going to find your wife playing in the NBA because all of these women who you run into have stars in their eyes. And he talked about his own relationship and, getting together with their mother. Obviously, he didn't have, NBA career, but prior to him becoming the big personality that he is, and I think that was some sound advice that he's given to his sons. Whether they listen to it or not is a different question. So we'll see.
I just want to respond because we're going to transition to this other story, but I'm listening to Delano. I'm going to age myself. He talked about printing out on MapQuest directions.
Right.
See, Delano don't know a damn thing about driving to a gas station, buying a map, and then going to the map and trying to figure out where it is. Jay, I don't know if you old enough to remember them days.
Me and Delano on the same page with printing out the map quest. I don't know how y'all read the maps, I'll be honest with
We
you.
had to go to a gas station and buy a map. And then figure. That's how we go on little family vacations from Indianapolis to St. Louis. You go buy a map and have to.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to switch up to something interesting out of Atlanta that's going to lead to a big discussion, Jay. There's a school, I think it's called Maryland. I just read Maryland Elementary School. Maryland Elementary School in Atlanta. One of the parents, a black mother, Kyla Posley, is suing the school and the school system and the principal, Sharon Briscoe, because she comes up to the school, the mother does, and says, hey, I want to get my daughter or child in this particular class. And the principal says, well, that's not one of our black classes. And the mama goes, what? What do you mean black class? Explain, blah. And they have 2 classrooms and 2 teachers, I think, for the black students, and 6 classrooms and 6 teachers for the white students. And everybody's segregated along racial lines. Now, this mother has filed this lawsuit. The school system has dropped the program. But this, to me, seems to be the direction we're headed. We've been seeing this on college campuses with, oh, we have a black graduation ceremony. We have black dorms and safe spaces for black people and blah, blah. And so it's like we're resegregated, which leads me to a big question, a huge question, and I'll drop on you first, Delano. Has integration, and we'll limit it initially to schools, has integration in school, has that been a failure?
That is a big question. Let me answer that question this way. I'm a big believer in desegregation, right? I don't think the law should allow for any barriers or obstacles to resources, whether that be education or housing or healthcare or property based on skin color. So I think Brown versus Board of Ed, which struck down segregation in schools, right? Legal barriers to education access was a good decision. But integration suggests something slightly different in the same family, but slightly different. What integration does, it says we want to give an affirmative push so that people are, of different ethnic or racial backgrounds are in mixed environments. And really what that really means is we want more black kids in white environments. That's really what it comes down to. I think the way we thought about that question 60 years ago is a lot more understandable, because at that time, for a lot of black children, particularly in the Deep South, the resources were going to where the white students were. But in 2021, I see no reason to hold to that particular, line of thinking, because in many large school districts, the per pupil expenditures are much, much higher than the national averages. In DC, I want to say it's about 27,000 per student, which is much higher than, as I said, than the national average. So I think integration has failed us to the extent that the country, and particularly among black folk, we think that anything that's all black is by definition substandard. So when you hear people talk about fighting segregation now, they don't even make the resource argument. They're just making the demographic argument. Oh, this school is 95% black and Hispanic. And my answer to that is, so what? What does it matter? If Lincoln High School is 95% black and that's segregated and bad, then why is Lincoln University and HBCU, that's 95% black, all of a sudden a culturally affirming education environment? So it's at some point we got to pick which one we think makes the most sense. So I'm for desegregation, but the notion that black children need to be next to white classmates to learn is not one that I subscribe to.
I'm going to take us a cut deeper, but before I do, Jay, you're a child of the South. Right. I'm from Indianapolis. Delano lives in Washington, D.C. How does this hit for somebody that born and raised in Tennessee? Just the discussion, the question, what I'm telling you about what's going on in Atlanta. How does any of this sound to you?
Well, it kind of take me back a little bit, because when I was in high school, growing up in a small town, we had a little race war that happened for about a few months, where the police had to come to our high school and be there for a while. And it kind of was just a miseducation between.
It was an integrated school.
Yeah, we have integrated school, but it's more whites than it is blacks. However, if you go watch sports, if you go watch a football game, a basketball game, you're like, oh, this is all black school. But nah, that's not the case. We had somebody that brought a rebel flag or whatever to school, and it popped off that way. The education just went out the door at that point. It was just more of, black students trying to get their rights of, we not going to allow this here for you to walk around and do this. And the white students, saying that basically we got a right to do whatever we want to do, basically because it's a majority white school. But it got squabbled out the way. I do agree with Delano in saying that to get an education, you have to be sitting next to a white student. It's just simple fact. The whole thing, how it started off is, we just want the same rights as anybody else. Don't grade me on the curve if you don't grade the white students on the curve. You know what I mean? If you're going to do this for the white students, do this for the black students as well. So everybody just want an equal playing field. That's basically how I grew up with it.
So I'm going to take us a cut deeper, and I'm going to give a little bit of my background that people that have been following me for a long time, they've heard me talk about this. But my high school, Warren Central High School in Indianapolis, when I was growing up, we were part of the first group of students that had busing into our school system. They bus black kids from the inner city out to Warren Central High School. My mother took a second job years previous, and I had moved out to that working class area in third or fourth grade at Warren Central. So I lived out there. And there were a handful of black students that lived out there. In eighth grade, I believe, is when they started busing in black students and even things out more, probably made the school 30% black. And so what is true is there were two different experiences for the black students that lived out there and the black students that were bused there. And like, when you lived out there and were a part of the community, I don't think anybody can debate this. I was the most popular kid at the school. Everybody, the teachers loved me, black students, white students, everybody. I got along with everybody. It was one of the greatest experiences. My black friends that got bussed out there, miserable experience. Yeah. They did not enjoy it. They felt they were mistreated. There was some truth to it. Two of my very best friends, I'll use their name, Mike Atkins, Willie Clark. I'll never forget, they got cut from the basketball team on some straight up racist BS. Coach only wanted two guys on the basketball team, two black dudes on the basketball team. Every year he'd have two on the team. And they cut Mike and Willie and kept some guys, I'm not gonna call their name, that just had no business being on the team. And I was a guy that went to the basketball practices every day. That was just but it was just a crime. And so there's other examples. I had an awesome captain of the football team. We won a state championship, nationally ranked. Jeff George is our quarterback. Great memories of my high school. My high school was awesome. I support it now. But I say all that to get to this bigger point of what is going on, I think, right now in America and why there's so much tension and separation going on in school systems. And I can't wait to hear your take on this, Delano, but there's a lack of shared values tearing America apart. We have, over the course of the last 30 to 40 years, I think we as black people have been coerced into a culture primarily driven by the music industry, but assisted by the movie and television industry. They created a lane for us that was criminal and a reflection of prison culture. And to me, I've written about this in the past, that like Public Enemy, KRS-One, if I go back and look at what I've written about, I could name a bunch, because I'm a huge hip hop guy, that were taking the music one way. And then here comes out of Los Angeles, NWA. And if you go listen to NWA's first album, I hear people, oh, it's great. They were so pro-black and they were fighting the power and putting out this music that challenged the establishment. And I can remember when I was at ESPN and running the Undefeated, I had one of our young journalists who, he was a kid, maybe barely out of the womb when NWA comes out with this album, but his memory of it. And I said, hey, man, go listen to, I think, wasn't their first Straight Outta Compton? Was their first? I said, go listen to it. And write down which songs are positive and which songs are negative. And I said, there's only one positive song or that could be considered positive, or F the police. I go, the rest of it is straight pornographic criminal trash. And I listened to it. I was the first person on Ball State's campus with some NWA music. And so I'm not trying to be like I was better than everybody else, but I'm just like, that was I don't know if it was the beginning, but it dramatically changed what we considered our culture. And it put us on a path where like our culture and our values are being tweaked by music coming out of Los Angeles. And again, it turned in, if you didn't have music that dropped the N-word constantly, that talked about killing bitches, N-words and hoes, if you didn't do all that, you weren't black. And so I look now at school systems and look at the lack of shared values are separating us, and that's what are making people want to run off and, well, we'll have a black this and we'll have a white this, because there's just no shared values. And the thing that I had in common, and a lot of us, even the bus kids, when I was going, there were shared values. Hey, we believe in this kind of family. We believe, and the shared values are just being eviscerated and gone away, and that's why there's so much disconnect. It's a long way of, I want to throw the ball back to you, Delano, but I want your reaction to that.
So I actually think, as it relates to the education establishment, right? And I know a number of educators, family, close friends. It's something that I've studied and as a father, certainly researched different schools and what they believe. And I actually think there are some shared values, particularly when we're talking about education in today's day and age. The problem is they're not the values that I have, right? And one of the things that you'll see if you study, again, particularly K through 12 education, and I'm talking about from the schools that train teachers to the local administrators down to the classroom. For many of them, they see activism and anti-racism as higher priorities for our children than academics. So when you see a principal taking a step like this, I'm sure she will say, and I think to an extent in the articles, she says she's doing it for the benefit of the black students. Now, given the demographics of the school, I think the school is probably 90+% white. She probably sees this as a way to protect the kids and affirm them, and probably doing it in the name of, anti-racism. And obviously you've heard about, a lot of the school boards that are, parents are coming out, they're angry, they're talking about critical race theory and the way schools are handling issues of race and gender and sexuality. And all across the board, what you see is that through line of activism is working its way, again, from the schools that educate teachers themselves down into the classroom. And I saw this, when my wife and I were looking at public schools for our oldest child, and, there were schools that were, some schools are bringing in people like, Ibram Kendi or other diversity consultants. Some schools have, books in their library, A is for activism. Some of the curriculum that they're bringing in comes from Black Lives Matter and their principles, down to, introducing kids as young as 3 to words like transgender and non-binary. So what I've seen, and this has been building over years, but particularly over the last, I'd say 5 years or so, it seems to have been amplified publicly, is that the schools are more focused on turning out the next generation of Democratic voters than they are kids who can read, write, and do arithmetic. And the way I think of it all the time is, what sense does it make to help Jamal be an activist if he needs Brad to write his signs? Because in a lot of these cities, particularly among black students, the reading and the math scores are terrible, to say the least. Some big cities, less than 30% of black students are doing math or English at grade level. So to me, the schools are misappropriating their resources. They have overstepped their boundaries and their authority. And I think that's one of the reasons you're starting to see parents take those things back, because in a lot of our public schools, everyone from the principal on down to the classroom is completely out of control.
Jay, I just want to ask you this question quickly, because then I want to make a point back to Delano, but how old are your kids?
I have 19, 12, and 8.
19, yeah, so you got kids still in school. And so here's, Delano, not the values I have is something you said. And this is what I agree with, and I'm gonna irritate people, but I'm sorry, I'm just gonna stick to the facts. This is what I'm talking about when I say no shared values, or we're being forced into values that I think are inconsistent with what we truly believe. And that's where the disconnect is. And so let's say if I'm raised in 25th Street Baptist Church, that's where your mama took you every Sunday, that's where your grandmama instilled in you things that are with me still today at 54. There's certain things that I believe in, certain values that I had put in me through the church and through football. And I'm gonna give you an example of what's going on in schools, and you guys know it better than I do, but just like you said, they're not teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're teaching LGBT values and transgender values, and you need to accept and be on board with this and blah, blah, blah. All things that used to be left to parents, family, and the church. They've overtaken that. And so they got you sitting in a school saying, no, we're going to tell you about sexuality and what you should believe about sexuality. And there's a group of Christians who are like, man, them ain't our values, and I'm sticking to it. And then there are a group of people that call themselves Christians, but are really Democrats. And what they know is, I got to get on board with this LGBT and all this other stuff. I got to abandon my values so I can be loyal to the Democratic Party. And so there are other Christians, they call them evangelicals, they call them right-wing white people or whatever. It's like, damn, y'all gonna jump off the Bible to be down with the Democratic Party? We don't have shared values, we have a disconnect. People ask me, Jay, Delano, I know you already know this, but when I came over here to the Blaze, man, you black, man, you gonna, them right-wing people, you down with Fox and blah, blah, blah. And this is what I told them about the Blaze in particular. I was like, go to their website, go listen to the branding of the Blaze, and it's based on two things, love of country and love of God. That's it. That's our shared values. I love this country and I love God. I love God more than I love the country, but those are the two things I love, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Me and my father, Jay, this will be the first time you heard it, but in 1984, these other guys have all heard it, we're living in a 400 square foot apartment in the hood. One bedroom, me and my father. He sleeps on the bed in the room, I sleep on the couch most nights. And I can go back to, I come from nothing. My father didn't graduate high school. My mother was a factory worker. They divorced when I was like 4 or 5 years old. These people, these woke people on social media, the Democrats are, oh, America is so racist, blah, blah. I was a little overweight, chubby dude that could play some football, wasn't that smart. I graduated college with a 2.3. This country, the climb that I made from that to being on TV and earning a lot of money and being able to do things for my family and stuff like that, and y'all want me to sit around and act like America is South Africa when Nelson Mandela was locked up? Miss me with that bullshit. This country, and so I don't have the shared values I have with Glenn Beck and the people at the Blaze is we love God and we love the country. And I'm seeing too many of us get caught up in a culture pushed by the music industry, pushed by Hollywood, pushed by the school system that demands, all that stuff your mama and daddy taught you, all that stuff you learned in the church, throw all that out the window in order for you to be down with us. And maybe in another 100 years, another Barack Obama will be president, or maybe Kamala Harris will bring her out of Canada and her Indian presidents, and we'll tell you that she's black, and y'all can be happy with that. And it's just like, I get in trouble, Jay, because I say this all the time. They ain't put a thoroughbred in the White House yet. Barack Obama wasn't a thoroughbred. He's half white. He was raised by white people. I think Kamala Harris allegedly is 20% black. I don't see it.
She half. Well, I think her father's Jamaican or whatever.
No, I think he's Indian. Or
mom is Indian, father Jamaican.
She's about 25%. And trust me on this, Jay, I got no problem with interracial dating, none. Go to Google, you can find it. I got no problem with it. But I know the difference between a thoroughbred and a African American, or 25% African American, whatever it is. I know the difference. I know the difference in thought, thinking, and all that other stuff. And so the lack of shared values and us being pushed in a direction that I think takes us away from our roots, that's why I see them, we're going towards segregation because we're producing kids that are so bathed in politics more than religion or anything else, belief in God, or even just belief in reading, writing, and arithmetic. We think the reason to go to school now is not to learn how to read and write, it's to learn how to be an activist in support of LGBT issues. And people can kiss my ass if they don't like it.
I mean, and honestly, you see that, particularly last year. Sometimes I would just, go on the social media page of my daughter's old school, because we pulled her out and we decided to homeschool. And you could see how that school and other schools in the city and other schools across the country were getting more and more invested in partisan politics. They have posts about DACA, or a school in Philadelphia would have a posting about a shooting that happened in Wisconsin. And these schools are all lining up and presenting these issues in one particular way. And one of the ironies is that when they talk about, white parents are against CRT because they don't want to learn history. But the problem is the schools that teach black children that they're victims, that are perpetual victims, and that white people are perpetual oppressors, they're not teaching history. Because if they did, they would know that even, in the days of post-emancipation, as black folk were trying to get more education, particularly in the South, that Booker T. Washington struck up a partnership with, at the time, the CEO of Sears named Julius Rosenwald, and they built about 5,000 schools across the American South for African-American students. One of the most interesting points about that is that they raised over $4.5 million from black communities, because they had the buy-in of the communities themselves. Now, this is not something that most kids are going to learn in school, but it shows that even at that time, black people had dignity and agency and self-reliance. And you don't get that in today's schools. What you get is oppression and victimhood, and guilting white people into doing for us what we think that we can't do for ourselves. So, as you said, in many ways, these schools have lost their way in terms of what their purpose is. And more importantly, and I'll probably write about this a little bit more in my column tomorrow, parents have lost their way because we have, in many respects, turned over all authority over our children's education to public schools. Let me be specific, government schools, right? We've turned it over to the schools, and we give our kids to them, and we say, you educate them. But it's really our responsibility, and the schools act in our service because we delegate part of that responsibility to them. And I think parents need to take that power and that authority back, because clearly a lot of these schools don't have our children's best interests in mind.
Delano, I'm gonna let you go. We are gonna pick this conversation back up tomorrow because I'm not done with it. But this is Jay's first trip on this show, and I want to turn to Jay and see, like, we don't went from joking about Brittany Renner to
Which is a serious subject, but Delano makes some good points, though. We leave it in the hands of the education system. I even saw one situation where they was teaching kids about masturbation. Like, why are we discussing
That's
this?
your job. That's daddy's job.
Let me do that. Let me talk about that, and I handle that in my own household. So we do, some people can't, homeschool. Some got factory jobs. Some people got to send their kids to school. But when you come home, it's still an education point. I still have my kids write reports on Bethune-Cookman and situations like that. I still pull up, we gonna watch Roots. I think it's a good thing for us as black people, though, when we do see that representation, that, because my oldest child, she talking about, running her own business one day. So it is a fact where we can see things as representation as black people and be able to put in our kids' mind that, hey, I might not need to go to college to get a 4-year degree for business when I can go look up all this information myself and run my own business. Now, we'll need some accounting and stuff like that, but it's instilled, I can say, in my children that you can run your own business, you can do for self, because I grew up in a neighborhood where it wasn't the greatest, wasn't a lot of money, wasn't a lot of jobs flowing in, but I didn't want to go work at a factory for 60 hours, 70 hours in a week or something like that. I had to find out on my own that you can make the same amount of money and do your own thing.
All right, Jay. Need everybody to go to youtube.com/Jason Whitlock. Hit that subscribe, like button, leave a comment. Fantastic show so far. Going to lighten it up a little bit, roll out to Chicago and talk with Greg Couch about the NCAA and their ruling over Baylor and what it signifies about the power of the NCAA. Welcome back. Time to roll out to Chicago and reconnect with Uncle Jimmy's favorite sports writer. Not my favorite sports writer, Uncle Jimmy's favorite sports writer, Greg Couch. Couch, you won't be able to double team me and beat up on me without Uncle Jimmy here. Jay Flake, big kinfolk, local comedian here in Nashville, sitting in for Uncle Jimmy.
Hi, Jay.
I've told him that he has to be on my team. Uncle Jimmy's on your team. You know, Uncle Jimmy's down with COVID, but we're hoping he's getting better. But let's get to your piece today, Greg. Baylor's sex scandal ruling proves Mark Emmert and the NCAA have long outlived their usefulness. Please explain.
Well, the whole thing reminds me of an old episode of WKRP in Cincinnati. I don't know if you remember that show. There's one famous episode where the guy.
I do.
There was one famous episode where he has a Thanksgiving promotion and he drops turkeys out of a helicopter. But before that, the station manager is nervous. He's a do-nothing guy. He doesn't know what his role is exactly. And he calls in a program director and says, well, how am I doing? And the program director says, well, you're doing great. And he says, well, doing great at what exactly? And he says, well, you're the station manager. And he says, well, that's what I am, but what do I actually do? And he says, well, you do boss stuff. So that's what this whole thing reminds me of. The NCAA, really has no purpose anymore. They ruled in the Baylor sexual assault case, that they are unable to rule. They don't have any power to make any ruling. Mark Emmert, the president of the NCAA, that's what he is. That's his job. But what does he do is the big question. I mean, it's hard to figure it out. So, there's no amateurism anymore, basically, from the Supreme Court ruling, and the NCAA lacks ability to enforce anything. And so, the only thing Mark Emmert has left and the NCAA has left is just boss stuff, And I mean, I realize that there are a lot of people who support Art Briles, the former coach, who is accused of just looking the other way when this stuff happened, when these sexual assaults supposedly, allegedly were happening. The NCAA said that he was looking the other way. Baylor did its own investigation and said he was looking the other way. Baylor fired everybody, and I know there's a lot of concerns or thoughts about whether Baylor just did that to try to move quickly in a PR move because of all the pressure from Twitter and things. But I mean, at some point, I don't know that he's being railroaded so much as just, I'm not trying to relitigate this thing, but just to say the NCAA is looking at this and saying whether he's guilty or not, we have no power to do anything. So I just don't know what the NCAA even does for a living anymore, other than just boss stuff.
Well, I think that is a reflection of a society that's moving at rapid speed, and like societal norms are changing overnight. And so what's happening, and you referenced this in your piece, and I thought appropriately, is that we're now in an environment where social media and the culture, the climate calls for instantaneous action. And so Art Briles got in trouble, and the Baylor program got in trouble 3, 4, 5 years ago over these alleged sex scandals. And Baylor does what schools do now. Let's drop the hammer as quick as we can. Let's find a scapegoat as quick as we can. Let's put it behind us so that we can move on to what's next. The NCAA tends to move at a 1970s, 1980s pace, where it's like, well, let's do an investigation. Let's take time. Let's make sure we get this exactly right. And so by the time the NCAA has made a ruling on this Baylor situation, Baylor's meted out all the justice. Everybody's been hanged and lynched already long before the NCAA has a chance to make a ruling. And Art Briles has been scapegoated, and to some degree, Greg, I'm a defender of Art Briles. I think he has been scapegoated. I did my own little investigation, and I can remember I worked with Jason King and these guys when I was at Outkick, and Clay Travis when I was at Outkick, and I came to a little bit of a different conclusion on what happened to Art Briles, and I just think he's kind of a convenient scapegoat, and that's the environment we're in now, where we schools act very quickly, find a convenient scapegoat, and move on to the next deal. You pointed out the contrast, I thought appropriately, of go back to 2012 and how the NCAA reacted to Penn State. Explain the difference.
Well, same president, Mark Emmert, and he comes out with Jerry Sandusky, if you remember, the Joe Paterno assistant coach, had been accused of, he's been convicted now, but had been accused of assaulting and raping young boys in a charity that he'd set up, and the NCAA came down with a hammer, and they fined him. They fined Penn State, I think, $600,000 if I remember right, and they suspended him from 4 years from the postseason. And they just really nailed Penn State. And Emmert said, we're gonna take care of people from here. We're never gonna put football ahead of taking care of people and doing the right thing and having an education ever again. That's the same guy as now who meets out a $5,000 fine and just says, throws up his hands and says, we can't do anything. So, I realize that with Penn State, the situation was that after he meted out those strong penalties, people came after him. They're questioning his authority. The schools did, and lawyers did, and ended up reducing the post-season penalty to 2 years, if I remember right, and started cutting back and questioning Emmert's authority. And now Emmert is all the way to the point of having seemingly no authority. But the thing is, he's had 9 years. If he really meant what he said about we're not going to let football take the role of importance over taking care of people in education, he's had 9 years to change the rules. He's had 9 years to fix whatever needed to be fixed in order to give himself control or power now. He didn't bother. So again, I think this guy should be fired today, right now. I don't even know how he still has his job at this point, because if you take a moral stance and then you wait 9 years and do nothing and find yourself, caught with your pants down and have no ability to have any power, take another moral stance in almost a very similar type of situation, at least theoretically, what is he doing? What does he do for a living? I have no clue. As far as whether Art Briles is being railroaded or not, the NCAA, if you read their report yesterday, they said that there's a lack of institutional control. They could have nailed Baylor for that right now. They could have penalized Briles right now and never allowed him to be a coach again. And the reason they didn't go after him for lack of institutional control was because they said it wasn't just the athletic department that had institutional problems, but it was the entire university. And I think that's a pretty weak argument for a football coach. You're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to not just lower yourself to 1 inch above the letter of the law. And to say that, I may have lacked institutional control, but so did the whole university. Everyone else is doing it too, so it's okay for me to do it. I just don't accept that as a reasonable, legitimate argument.
You make an interesting point that I completely disagree with. And what Art Briles and what Baylor and the NCAA to some degree are recognizing and saying is sexual assault is an American problem, a societal, a global problem. It can't be reduced to football. And we keep using football and basketball and athletes as, look, they're the bad guys. And the fraternities on campus, the sororities on campus, the rest of the students, that they're having the complaints against the guys at the fraternity houses, just as many, just as frequent as what's going on at the football team or the basketball team. But the stuff at the frat house never gets addressed because it never makes the news cycle. Once it makes the news cycle and gets tossed into the Twitter, Facebook, social media mill and exploited in those environments, now you're forced to take some kind of immediate action because if not, journalists that are looking for clickbait and traction and relevancy, television networks that are looking for radio, podcasts that are looking for content, digital TV shows that are looking for content. We need bad guys. We need heroes and villains. And you know what? Art Browse, he makes $4 million a year. He would be a perfect villain. And again, I don't know if we're being fair to these people and keeping these things in the proper context. And this isn't me making a bunch of excuses. This is me having lived a full life and having seen what myself as a former athlete and what the former athletes I was involved with when in my playing days, and some of the things that literally I can drop to my knees right now and be, oh my God, thank God we didn't get in trouble for that. And if I wanted to, I could tell some stories right now today that fresh in my mind, like, oh my God, in 2020, woo! And when I think about the fraternities and stuff, the parties I went to when I was at Ball State, the stuff that went on, and just being a bouncer at the most popular bar at Ball State, it's just unfair to drop all this at the feet of athletics and a particular coach when you got a societal problem that we're all trying to work through. The Me Too movement, as much as it's been ripped and criticized, I gotta admit, it's been necessary. All of us needed to be shaken up and made to think about, like, hey, what were we doing? What are we doing? How did we allow this? Yeah, it's like you watch the TV show. Jay, you ever watch the TV show Mad Men?
Yes.
And it's like, I watched Mad Men, it's like, that was going on in the workplace?
Yeah.
You was patting asses and banging the secretaries and all your underlings and talking this kind of crazy in the work. And then I said that about Mad Men. Greg, I was literally thinking about when I worked at the Ann Arbor News in the 90s. And I just think the conversations we had in the workplace, I'm like, whoo! I mean, it was like watching Andrew Dice Clay and Richard Pryor sit around, and we were doing this in the workplace, females around. We needed to be shaken up. And I guess Art Browse is a good scapegoat and symbol or whatever, but it's pervasive throughout society. Greg, good piece. I'm going to let you go. Okay. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say
Go ahead.
Two quick things about what you just said.
Yeah.
If I understand what you're saying, first of all, about the immediacy of things, but the NCAA has had 6 years now. And so, yeah, we don't want to rush to a rash decision. They've had 6 years, and their conclusion is we're not strong enough to make a conclusion. So that's a little bit of a different argument here, where I think if the NCAA doesn't have the power to do anything, then they should not exist at all. And the second thing is, I get what you're saying about this being pervasive in society, and you're right. I worked in newsrooms, and we said horrible things too. But that doesn't mean you let certain people go from doing the wrong thing just because the whole society is doing the wrong thing. I mean, in that way, if that's the case, we can't do anything but convict everyone together at the exact same time. I mean, I think if there's something going wrong on a football team, why not go after the football team? I don't understand, just because it's happening in the school newspaper or it's happening in other jobs doesn't preclude the football team from doing the wrong thing or excuse them. So I guess I just push back with you on to you on that a little bit.
I think that's a great point. I think, and I don't have it all right in front of me now, and we may follow up on this tomorrow, is the allegations about Art Browse and the football team were so exaggerated that he can't be judged in proper perspective, is part of my argument. And so you're right, if he's done some wrong things and the program was doing some wrong things, he does need to be held accountable, and I got no problem with that. But when the allegations are framed in a very explosive way to make it so, we can get rid of Art Browse, scapegoat him, and move on, that's where I put, and not really deal with the problems campus-wide at Baylor, societal-wide, any place like, there go the bad guy. We got Tony Montana, the drug problem's over. Well, no, it's not. And then the last thing I'll say in defense of Mark Emmert, and I really don't have much of a defense for him, but I do want to be clear about this. No one is going to sit in his spot or even your spot and say, you know what? I'm worthless at my job and this job has no purpose. And in order to move this organization forward, I need to announce that and move the NCAA in a direction where they eliminate me and we basically eliminate the entire organization because we have no purpose. And so here's another person that I'm saying, let's don't scapegoat Mark Emmert, because you know who actually runs the NCAA? School presidents.
Right.
It's their organization. Mark Emmert is their little scapegoat puppet that they pay $1 million, $2 million a year to swallow all these bullets and be the bad guy. The school presidents are actually the bad people. They held on to amateurism as a way of exploiting the athletes and financing a bunch of other stuff on campus. They're the actual bad guys, but they run Mark Emmert out there, and whoever they replace Mark Emmert with, he would be the bad guy or she would be the bad guy. And it's just more of the same. But you made a couple of good points. You and LeVarrington, y'all actually did a good job. I always expect Delano to say great things, but you and LeVar kind of impressed me today. Y'all actually said some good things. I got to think about that. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. And Jay and I are going to get back to, having a little stupid fun and talking about Brittany Renner. She's going to be our approval rating. Before we go, though, go to youtube.com/Jason Whitlock. Hit that subscribe and like button. When we come back, hopefully we'll run some more pictures of Brittany Renner on screen. That'll be entertaining, and we'll talk about her approval rating. You know I'm high on it. All right, welcome back. Jason Whitlock, comedian Jay Flake here with us today, filling in for Uncle Jimmy, who's fighting COVID right now. But we're not going to dwell on that, say a little prayer for Jimmy today, but we're going to dwell on Brittany Renner right now for our approval rating. We started the show talking about Brittany, PJ Washington, the NBA player. They're at odds with each other and rumors that he's going to have to pay an exorbitant amount of child support. That $200,000 a month figure is ridiculous and not true. But we're going to do an approval rating on Brittany Renner, and I'm going to be very high on her, I got to be honest. But so job performance, her job is a fitness model and thoughting, if thoughting is a job.
Apply for thoughting here.
Damn near perfection to me. I've got her at a 24.
All right.
Jay, now it's your.
I put it at a 25. That's the top-notch, upper echelon performance, I must say, from her.
Yeah. Well, look, she landed an NBA player just as she planned. I could get the perfection. Character. Do we think much of her character? Is she trustworthy? Is she a high-integrity person? As much as I like Brittany, I got to say, character, I got to go a little low on that. I saw some video where we showed a clip or excerpt from where she was talking about the 24 different partners she's had. Mm-hmm. She listed them by profession. I think 11 athletes, 6 entertainers. Anyway, so I've got her at a 6 as it relates to character. Jay?
I got her at 2. I got her at a 2. I mean, you could probably trust her to do what she says she's going to do because she's already shown what she's going to do. As far as character-wise, I got it too because at the same time, she can't be trusted.
All right, so great segue into authenticity. I find her very authentic. You go look at any of her videos or what, she tells you exactly who she is, exactly what she's about, and then she does exactly that. I have her at a perfect score of 25 as it relates to authenticity.
I got her at 20. I had to knock off a few points because, like I said, she can't be trusted. So,
You still on the character deal, but she's authentic. You know, she doesn't. I'm a thought. Don't try to turn a thought into a housewife.
no, don't ever try to do that.
Yeah. All right, and then finally, last but not least, it factor. Anytime you cop to spending 30 minutes scrolling someone's Instagram page, even if it's only once a month you did it, they got an it factor, and Brittany certainly has it. Not quite perfect. There's a couple of IG models that I remember from my days of my IG addiction that maybe I thought they weren't my favorites because Brittany would bring her mom on and she'd do all this talking or whatever. But anyway, I got her at a 24 in it factor.
And I gave her a perfect score. Maybe I didn't have the IG addiction that you had.
Oh.
So maybe I missed a few models that you were talking about. But dadgummit, she got the it factor.
There you go, 25. All right, so I have her at an overall score of 79, which qualifies her for smoke show status. Jay, you got her at 72. She's a grease fire. This is in terms of hotness. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Look, you can be dumpster fire is the lowest category. I think candle lit is next. Grease fire, smoke show, and then the hottest you can be is blazing hot. She's not quite. Yeah, I think you got to be 90 or above to be blazing hot. All right, that's it, and that's all for us today. We'll be back tomorrow, and Jay will be back with us. Jay, I need you to listen in your ear.
All right.
You hear that music? That's a
hear that
girl
music.
named Tamara. She lives out in LA. She's one of my favorite people. She made this song specifically for me. and any of the work I do on TV. For freedom. Anyway, that's it and that's all. We'll see you tomorrow.
No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on a corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, all deceiving. We all wanna be free. We want freedom. I wanna be, I just want, I wanna be, I just want.